Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of our previous lesson, which we entitled Ecclesiastes 3 1 through 15, the cycles of life. We're going to take it where we left off in the third chapter, verse 16. We're going to try and make it all the way home to the 16th verse of the fourth chapter, but in order to do that, we got to really minimize our preamble. So in the first chapter, Quoleth, or Solomon, bemoans while observing the cycles of nature, moving inexorably with no apparent or even with no obvious or even apparent purpose. But he does bring himself through the evolutionary trajectory of the narrative to fluctuate between doubt and faith. So he does begin to have some clarity on the purpose for everything that transpires under the sun, whereas in the first he is despaired, delusioned, and doubtful, and skeptical, and pessimistic. He does bring himself to a more optimistic prognosis in the third chapter. To all there is an appointed time, even a time for every pursuit under the sun. The word appointment means that nothing is an accident. You know, the universe in motion is not the random processes of chance evolutionary things in motion. These have a design and an order and a reason and a purpose, and there is an intelligent being governing the motions and the mechanics of the universe. And the every time under the heaven, now the word every, he basically sums up a broad fraction, if not the sum totality, of human experiences through 14 paired opposites in the next 7 verses. We're not going to elaborate on them, but we do feel that they deserve to be read out loud just because they're so beautiful in themselves. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to throw away stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. At the filming of this, we are in the somewhere past the midpoint of the corona, the original, because there's probably going to be waves of these. But we know what season we are living in right now. It is not a time this is a time to refrain from embracing social distancing and all that stuff. Just to give one example, back to the poem itself. A time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for battle and a time for peace. There is so much more that could be said on all these, but that's just as far as we need to go. The 11th verse, he speaks of, he made it all pretty in its time, even the ages he has put in their hearts, except that no one finds out the work that Elohim does from the beginning to the end. Pretty is not nearly a strong enough word. I believe that beautiful is the better translation. Girls can be pretty, not that they can't be beautiful, but everything that God designs, the intricacy of his art, pretty is not nearly a strong enough word. Ages is also better translated as eternity. So we have the notion and the conception and the concept of eternity. It's instilled in our hearts and our minds, and we have a longing and aspiration for life after death, and we are able to comprehend eternity, and we are able to know our eternal destination, and it's one of 2 places, although I do subscribe to the theory that there are degrees of exaltation in the afterlife. But it is beautiful but tantalizing. It is incomprehensible. There is so much we cannot comprehend, far less control, but it is under the guiding and governance of the supreme sovereign creator, who has the panoramic omnipresence from the beginning to end. His omnipresence extends both across the time and space continuum. He's not only everywhere at once, but he is also every time at once. He is past, present, and future, and everything in between simultaneously as he exists in himself, because he is an eternal being. So we experience and understand time altogether differently than them, yet we have the notion for eternity, which was planted in us by the eternal creator in us, and that is a gift from him. As is, he takes, he says that word in the 13th verse, but we're going to read the 14th, the word gift. I know that whatever Elohim does is forever. There is no adding to it, and there is no taking from it. Elohim does it, that men should fear before him. He is eternal being. He is in the beginning. He is from the beginning. He is before the beginning. He antedates time itself. He put time in motion, and that's why he is everywhere in all times at once. And everything that he does is eternal because everything that he is in himself is eternal. All his attributes are eternal. For example, he is sacred eternally. He is love eternally. All these things he is because he is eternal. So all those attributes are eternal in him. And you can resist it and you can oppose it, but only in your mind. There is no you have to have the serenity to accept the things you cannot change. We cannot add a single iota to his. That doesn't mean we can't make our lives better by the responsible exercise of our God-given agency. But there is no adding to it, so too is there is no taking from it. Everything is in God's hands, and the serenity comes when we accept that and don't try to control our circumstances all around it. We cannot manipulate the universe to our molding or our likeness or our preference. But Elohim does it in order to instill the fear of him before men. And the fear of Elohim is the axiomatic assumption of wisdom literature. This is Quoleth, the author of Ecclesiastes, distinguished from Quoleth or Solomon's conclusion. Solomon's sermon, shall we say, is chapter 1, verse 2 to 12, verse 8, and then the author of Ecclesiastes wrote it down. There's more on that, but we really can't deviate much further. We're going to begin the lesson itself, the 16th verse. Then again I saw under the sun, in the place of judgment, wickedness was there, and in the place of righteousness, wickedness was there. That phrase, under the sun, represents the earth, everything that is under the sun. So this is the earthbound view, and there is human justice, which is really injustice, because there is no balance in our judicial system, or the people with the power use it to oppress and exploit those people who have less than them. So there is a dichotomy between the earthly judgment and the heavenly judgment alluded to in the next verse. But in the place of righteousness, wickedness was there, and this is also true in our church. The sin in the church is appalling to the world and the church itself. That there is wickedness in the house of God is a blight on the church universal, but God's designs cannot be destroyed by the wickedness of men. He is supreme and sovereign, and he overrules the triumphant wicked, the wicked who triumph at the expense of the innocent in the final judgment. I said in my heart, Elohim judges the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. The theme of judgment abounds and defines much of Ecclesiastes. He's prompted by the question of what is the meaning or purpose to everything. Why should one live a righteous life? And the answer is that there is a judgment. So the judgment provides the incentive to live well and to be good to others and to God, because the judgment is the motivating factor. And whether you are righteous or you are wicked, the judgment is universal, but the destination of the righteous, which is heaven, is not. Solomon doesn't quite bring himself to a heavenly conception or even idea or an awareness quite yet. In the 3rd chapter, he finally gets there by the 12th chapter, 7th verse. I said in my heart, concerning the matter of the sons of men, Elohim examines them to see if they indeed are beasts. We are animals. We do belong to the animal kingdom, but this is not the random chance accident of evolutionary processes. These are designs. Nevertheless, we have all the features and characteristics of the animals. Yet we have dominion over them. We are superior to them, and our lives are clearly superior. But war, human war, spoken of. Remember the 8th verse. Time for war, time for battle, time for peace. Is just an activity fitted only for beast, yet none so prolifically as the beast of man. So we are animals, we are savage, we are carnivorous consumers, and we are out for number one. We are motivated by survival of the fittest and looking out for number one. We are survival-oriented creatures, and in this we are no different than beast. For the event of the sons of man is also the event of beast. One event befalls them. As one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have one breath. Man has no advantage over beast, for all is futile. The event that he speaks of is death, and Solomon, this is his most mature musings. Ecclesiastes represent his latest writing. Proverbs, the middle years, and Song of Solomon, the early years. So he is dominated by the fear of death. In the ancient first century Jewish philosopher Philo said that there is nothing calculated to enslave man more than the fear of death. But he in the second chapter, he is the wisest man who ever lived, yet he bemoans that he is the advantages of a life lived with wisdom are self-evident. We have direction, we have guidance, we have purpose, we have reason, where the fool does not, but all that is futile and reduced to the death is the great equalizer, which comes to the righteous and the wicked and the wise and the foolish alike. None can escape it. So what advantage is there to being righteous, and what advantage is there to being wise? And now he's asking, what advantage is there to being human, the superior dominant species, and life is self-evidently better for humans, is equally obvious as that the life of wisdom, the dichotomy of our intelligences that exists between humanity and the animals, is even wider than that which exists from the wisest among us to the foolish among us. And life with a brain and rational capacities just enables an awareness of so much more. We really have to appreciate the minds that we have. But also use that mind to respect the fact that we are beast, we will die like them, and we are mortal, the same as any other animal. So our mortality is to remind us that we are not God, although we seem to think it in no small part because we are the dominant species on the earth. But it is all futile. There's that word once more, one of the 35 appearances in the book of Ecclesiastes. All are going to one place, all came from dust, and all return to dust. Human beings specifically were created from the dust in Genesis 2:7, and as we come, naked we shall come, and naked we will return. And where we came from, what we are, is where we will return. So this cycle of our creation and decay, our life and our death, we begin where we began. This is the perfect circle of life and death. Remember, second verse, a time to be born and a time to die. But who knows if the spirit of the sons of man, which goes upwards, and the spirits of the beast, which goes down to the earth. He is questioning if there is a life after this life, if there is an afterlife, if there is a heaven, if there is a hell. Who knows? This is the great mystery, and matters of faith cannot be proven empirically, but if they could be, they would cease to be matters of faith. So this doubtful expression seems inconsistent with the Bible, and the same thing happens when you read the book of Psalms. Some of the doubtful expressions in there, you may be questioning, what is this doing in the Bible? This is so out of place. This is so inconsistent. But Solomon is writing from a concealed premise, that of an apologist. He is dismantling the secular thoughts that he fluctuates back and forth to, and shows ultimately to prove the bankruptcy of a life lived apart from God, a life that is secular. But the word spirits, no, we don't know the Hebrew original, but beast have no, there is some confusion as to the difference between souls and spirits, and the best way to explain it is that human nature exists in Trinity. We have bodies, we have souls, and we have spirits. A body enables awareness of external stimuli. Plant lives have bodies. A soul enables an awareness of other, a self-awareness, an awareness of other people, rather. And animals have that. But a spirit is what enables an awareness of divinity. In this, we are distinct from the animals, and this is the most plausible answer to the unanswerable question of what does the image of God precisely consist of. There is no data as to the properties, but this makes the difference. But souls are immortal and spirits are immortal, but bodies are mortal. They are designed to decay, perish, and wither and perish. But our spirit, he does bring himself to a faithful answer to this question, which is enveloped in mystery at the present moment. He doesn't have the answer that he concludes to in the 7th verse of the 12th chapter, where he does express faith in a spiritual resurrection. He is not so faithful as to have a bodily resurrection faith, but he does answer this question in the affirmative, or the positive or optimistic answer. So I saw that man could do no better but to rejoice in his own works, for that is his portion. For who would bring him to see what shall be done, shall be after him. The answer to life and satisfaction, we can have joy if we rejoice in our own works, and the trick to do that is to not be working ceaselessly and so hard, and ad nauseum, ad infinitum, just for the sake of working. We are entitled to enjoy the fruits of our labor, and that is a gift from God. So when we acknowledge the giver, but to prefer the gifts above the giver is tantamount to idolatry. So if we have the God-centric rejoicing in our works, then we will. That is our portion. That just means our inheritance, our reason. This is the gift from God. This is the portion that He gives us. And we have to accept the finitude of our understanding, the limited window that we have mortal creatures have. Mortal creatures, although we are moral, whereas animals are not. Animals are not immoral; they are amoral. They go according to their design and function, and they do not resist it. And they are models for obedience. Mankind is the only species in rebellion against God, but the thought and the reality of judgment provides the motivation and incentive for us to live righteously and unto Him, and gratefully and reverently. We're going to check the time briefly on this. We are going to wrap up this lesson just because we've made it past the 15-minute mark, but we want to give the 4th chapter its full concentration and focus that it is due. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Take care until then. We're not going to be able to make it, if we took these 7 verses, took as long as we did, we're not going to be able to get to the 16th, but we did make it past the 15-minute points. We really can't go past 30 on this, but that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. Take care until then. Bye-bye.